the town of Dry Creek lived by habit more than hope. Dust blew through its single main street every afternoon, like clockwork, settling on hitching posts, porch rails, and the shoulders of men who had learned not to complain. The bell above the marshal's office hadn't rung in years, not since the last real trouble, when 3 men were buried and the town collectively decided quiet was safer than justice. Jack Turner stood beneath that bell now, boots planted, eyes scanning the street the way he always did. Being marshal wasn't about looking tough, it was about noticing what didn't belong. A crooked board, a nervous hand, a stranger who didn't look away fast enough. That was when the gunshot split the air. The sound cracked, sharp and clean, echoing off the wooden storefronts. Before anyone could speak, the bell rang loud, clear, and alive. Dust shook loose from its rim as the sound rolled across Dry Creek like a challenge. Another shot followed. The bell rang again. People poured out of the saloon, the hotel, the mercantile. Some reached for guns. Others just stared, stunned that the velvet bell had been struck dead center from halfway down the street. Jack's hand rested on his holster. As he turned, a woman stood near the livery stable, revolver still raised, smoke curling from the barrel. She wore trousers instead of a skirt, boots worn thin at the heel, and a long coat the color of the road itself. Her hat shadowed her face, but her stance was steady, no tremble. No wasted motion. Jack walked toward her, slow and deliberate. "Lower the gun," he said. She did, smoothly, like she'd been lowering guns all her life. "You mind explaining why you just rang my bell?" Jack asked. She looked up at the courthouse, then back at him. Her eyes were calm, sharp, and unafraid. It deserved to be heard. A murmur ran through the crowd. Jack stopped, a few paces away. "Name, Elizabeth Hale." The name meant nothing to him, but the way she said it did. No hesitation, no apology. "You passing through?" he asked. "Maybe," she replied. "Depends what I find." Jack glanced at the bell again. 2 shots, same spot. At that distance, most men would have missed once, maybe twice. "You always announce yourself by firing into town property?" he asked. Elizabeth's mouth curved into the faintest smile. "Only when silence gets too comfortable." That earned a few uneasy laughs from the onlookers. Jack didn't join them. Dry Creek had rules spoken and unspoken. Women didn't carry guns openly. Strangers didn't test the town, and no one rang the bell unless there was blood to justify it. Yet here she stood, breaking all 3. "You staying long enough to cause trouble?" Jack asked. She met his eyes without blinking. "Only the kind that needs causing." Jack held her gaze, searching for bluff or bravado. He found neither. What he found instead unsettled him. A woman who knew exactly who she was and didn't need permission to be it. "Marshal Jack Turner," he said, finally. "If you're staying, you'll follow the law." Elizabeth nodded once. "Fair enough." She turned and walked toward the hotel, the crowd partying instinctively to let her pass. No one spoke until she was gone. Jack looked back up at the bell, still swaying slightly in the breeze. For the first time in years, Dry Creek wasn't quiet, and Jack had the uneasy feeling that Elizabeth Hale hadn't come to let it be again. By morning, Dry Creek had already decided 2 things about Elizabeth Hale. She was dangerous, and she was interesting. The town argued over which mattered more. Jack Turner watched her from across the street as she stepped out of the hotel, sunlight catching the dust in her hair. She moved with purpose, not rushed, not hesitant. Most strangers looked around when they arrived in Dry Creek, measuring the place, checking exits. Elizabeth didn't. She walked like she already knew where she stood. Jack didn't like that. She crossed the street, toward the mercantile, boots striking wood with a steady rhythm. A couple of men tipped their hats. One whistled. She ignored them all. When she came back out, a box of ammunition tucked under her arm. Jack pushed off the post he'd been leaning against. "Morning," he said. "Marshal," she replied, not slowing. "Towns still talking about your shooting." "They should practice more," she said. Jack fell into step beside her. "You aiming to stay?" "For now." That bell stunt wasn't the way to make friends. Elizabeth stopped walking and turned to face him. Up close, Jack could see the faint scar along her jaw and the way her eyes assessed him, not rudely, but thoroughly. "I didn't come to make friends," she said. "I came to see if this town had a backbone." Jack stiffened, and "I'm still deciding." That should have angered him. Instead, it sparked something else, something close to curiosity. "You carry like someone who's been in trouble before," Jack said. "I have." "You run from it." "No." Jack studied her face. "Then why Dry Creek?" Elizabeth hesitated, just a fraction of a second. "Because quiet places hide loud truths." Before Jack could press further, a shout came from down the street. Two men were arguing outside the saloon, voices sharp, hands twitching near their belts. Jack moved instantly. "Stay back." Elizabeth didn't. The argument exploded into violence. One man swung, the other drew. Jack lunged, but Elizabeth was faster. Her revolver cleared leather in one smooth motion, aimed not at flesh, but at the dirt inches from the man's boot. The shot cracked loud. The man froze. Jack disarmed him, breathing hard. When he looked up, Elizabeth was already holstering her gun. "You didn't have to do that," Jack said tightly. "I know," she replied. "But you were a step behind." That stung more than it should have. Later, Jack sat alone in his office, replaying the moment. He prided himself on being the fastest, the sharpest. No one had ever stepped ahead of him like that, not without consequences. And yet, he couldn't deny it. She'd saved a life. Maybe two. That evening, Elizabeth sat at a corner table in the saloon, nursing a whiskey. Jack entered the room, quieting in that way it did when the marshal arrived. He didn't head for his usual seat. He went to her. "You planning on embarrassing me all week?" he asked. She lifted her glass. "Only when necessary." Jack sighed and took the chair across from her. "You shoot like you learned young." "My father believed in preparation," she said. "The world proved him right." "You running from something, Elizabeth." She met his gaze, steadily. "Aren't we all?" For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them felt taut, like a wire pulled tight. Jack finally nodded. "Dry Creek doesn't scare easy." Elizabeth smiled, not soft, not cruel, just honest. "Neither do I." As Jack stood to leave, he realized something unsettling. For the first time since he'd pinned on the badge, someone had walked into his town who didn't look at him like the law. She looked at him like an equal. Dry Creek woke early the morning. The challenge was spoken out loud. Word traveled faster than horses in small towns, and by sunrise, everyone knew Cole Maddox planned to prove a point. Cole was big, loud, and had never lost a shooting contest he could brag about afterward. That fact mattered more to him than the truth. Jack heard about it from 3 different people before breakfast. "She's got no business showing him up," one man said. "Marshal ought to stop it," another muttered. Jack didn't respond. He found Elizabeth behind the hotel, checking her revolver with methodical care. She didn't look surprised to see him. "Cole Maddox wants a shooting match," Jack said. "Bottles at 50 paces. Elizabeth clicked the cylinder shut. "I figured you don't have to accept." She looked up at him, then eyes sharp. "He already decided I would." Jack exhaled slowly. "Men like him don't lose well." "Neither do I." The challenge took place just outside town, near the old fence line where Dry Creek met open land. Bottles were lined along the rail, green glass catching the morning sun. Townsfolk gathered in a wide half-circle, murmuring like they were waiting for a storm to break. Cole grinned when he saw Elizabeth. "You sure you want to do this, miss?" Elizabeth stepped into position. "You sure you want me to?" A few laughs rippled through the crowd. Stood between them, face hard. "Rules are simple. 1 shot per bottle. No funny business." Cole tipped his hat. Elizabeth didn't. Cole went first. His first shot shattered glass. His second missed, clipping the fence. The third struck a bottle, but low. Smiles faded. Elizabeth stepped forward, calm as still water. She raised her revolver. The first bottle exploded. So did the second. The third didn't just shatter, it vanished into a spray of green dust. Elizabeth lowered the gun. Silence fell heavy over the crowd. Cole stared at the fence, then at her face darkening. His hand twitched toward his holster. Jack moved instantly. Gun leveled. Don't. For a long second, it looked like blood would stain the dirt anyway. Then Cole spat, turned, and stormed off. The crowd slowly broke apart, voices low, respectful now. Elizabeth reloaded her revolver, unfazed. Jack approached her, heart still pounding. "You didn't have to humiliate him," Jack said. "I didn't," she replied. "He did that himself." Jack shook his head. "You're making enemies." Elizabeth met his gaze. "I've had worse." Later that evening, Jack found her near the edge of town, watching the sun sink behind the hills. "You could have left after today," he said. "No one would have blamed you." "I don't run when men get loud," she replied. Jack leaned against the fence beside her. "You ever think about what you're earning here?" She glanced at him. "Respect." He nodded. "And mine?" That surprised them both. Elizabeth studied him for a moment. "Careful, Marshal. Respect has a way of complicating things." Jack smiled faintly. "So do bells." Elizabeth laughed softly, the sound brief but real. It stayed with Jack long after they parted ways. Dry Creek had gone quiet again. But it wasn't the same silence. It was the kind that comes after a truth is spoken and can't be taken back. The night trouble came to Dry Creek. The wind carried it first. Jack felt it before he heard the horse's unease crawling up his spine as he stood on the porch of the marshal's office, watching lantern light flicker across empty streets. Towns that learned to be quiet often forgot how to defend themselves. Then the gunfire started. Shots cracked from the eastern edge of town, sharp and frantic. Horses screamed. Someone shouted. Jack was moving before the second shot rang out. By the time he reached the corral, shadows were everywhere, men moving fast, faces hidden, rifles raised, rustlers organized, bold enough to strike at night. Jack fired once, dropping a man near the fence. Another shot whizzed past his shoulder. He ducked, heart pounding. Then a familiar sound cut through the chaos, a clean, precise gunshot. Elizabeth emerged from the darkness like she'd been part of it all along, revolver flashing in the moonlight. She moved with purpose, covering angles. Jack hadn't even turned toward yet. "Left side," she called. Jack pivoted, just in time to see a rider go down. They fell into rhythm without speaking. Each shot measured, each movement deliberate. It wasn't chaos anymore. It was coordination. One of the rustlers tried to flee through the alley. Elizabeth dropped to one knee and fired. The man hit the dirt, gun skidding away. Within minutes, it was over. The remaining attackers fled into the night, leaving behind groans, broken wood, and the heavy smell of gunpowder. Jack stood in the middle of the street, chest heaving. He looked at Elizabeth, lantern light catching the dust on her coat. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded. "You, thanks to you." Townsfolk began to emerge, eyes wide with disbelief. Some stared at Elizabeth, like they were seeing her for the first time. Jack turned to them. "This town stands because people stood for it tonight." His eyes didn't leave Elizabeth when he said it. Later, as the wounded were tended and the dead removed, Jack found Elizabeth sitting on the steps of the hotel, cleaning her revolver. "You didn't have to fight," he said quietly. She glanced up. "I wanted to." Jack hesitated. "Most people would have run." She met his gaze. "I'm tired of running." That admission hung between them. Jack sat beside her. "You ever think about staying?" Elizabeth's hands paused. "I didn't plan to, but..." She looked out at the darkened street. "But some places fight back. That matters." Nodded. "And so do the people who help them." For the first time, Elizabeth smiled without restraint. It wasn't wide, but it was real. "Before they parted," Jack said, "Dry Creek owes you." Elizabeth shook her head. "No, it stood up for itself." As she walked inside, Jack realized something that unsettled and grounded him all at once. Elizabeth Hale hadn't just earned the town's respect. She'd earned his trust, and for a man who lived by the law and the weight of every choice, that was the most dangerous thing of all. Sunrise painted Dry Creek in streaks of gold and rose. The dust shimmered in the light like embers rising from a fire long extinguished. Jack Turner stood in the middle of the street, hands on the rope of the bell above the marshal's office. It had been silent for too long, its voice buried beneath years of neglect and dust. Today, he intended to hear it ring again. Elizabeth Hale stepped out from the hotel doorway, boots crunching the gravel. She wore her usual coat, hat tilted slightly, revolver tucked at her side. She didn't speak at first, just watched Jack, studying the way the early light fell across his face. "You really going to do it?" she asked softly. Jack gave a small grin. Thought it was time to see if the bell remembered how to sing. Elizabeth stepped closer, her shadow stretching alongside his. "Some bells only ring for certain people." "Lucky for us," Jack said. "I think this one's meant to ring for you too." For a moment, they stood together in silence. The town around them was just waking, storefronts slowly opening. A few early risers emerging to see what the marshal and the woman who'd shaken Dry Creek to its core were up to. Jack grabbed the rope and pulled. The bell swayed, then rang a clear, loud clang that rolled over the town. Elizabeth's eyes lit up at the sound, and she lifted her head, as if listening for something more than just the metal striking itself. "Not bad," she said, a rare smile tugging at her lips. "Couldn't have done it without your lessons," Jack replied, laughing softly. "I may be martial, but you taught me patience and aim." Elizabeth shook her head. "You always had it. I just showed you it could be sharper." Jack studied her face for a long moment. "You planning on leaving this time?" "For now," she said quietly. Then, after a pause, she added, "But some places and some people make you reconsider." Felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Hope, maybe even anticipation. The town had changed. No longer quiet, no longer small in spirit. Dry Creek had been challenged, defended, and now stood stronger than ever. And at the center of it all were the two of them, an unlikely pair, brought together by bullets, courage, and stubborn hearts. Jack extended a hand. "Stay," he said simply. Elizabeth looked at it, then at him. Then finally, she took it. Not just as a gesture of trust, but as a choice. The sun rose higher, bathing them in warmth. Children's laughter echoed in the distance, and somewhere a dog barked, chasing shadows across the street. The bell swayed gently in the morning breeze, reminding everyone that Dry Creek was alive. And now, so were its people, stronger, braver, and maybe just a little wiser about who they let into their hearts. Elizabeth rested her hand on Jack's arm. "Looks like this town can handle a little more noise." Laughed, "Only if it comes with someone who knows exactly when to ring the bell." She tilted her hat and smiled. "Then maybe I'll stay." And for the first time in a long time, Jack Turner felt that Dry Creek wasn't just his town anymore. It was their town. And that was a kind of peace he hadn't dared hope for. The bell rang once more, echoing through the street, clear and fearless, just like the woman standing beside him. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Western stories.